everybody, and welcome to episode 415 of Retro Encounter, where today we will be talking about Elc the Lad 2, continuing our discussion from last week, digging right into this series. I am your guest host, Wes Iliff, and with me, as per last week, I have some lovely guests, including Audra Bowling.
Hello, hello.
Ben Love.
Hi.
And Nick Mangiaracina.
Hello.
Oh, I was supposed to mix up the order. Oh no. Now it's like I'm playing favorites.
Oh.
So let's dig right in. Elc the Lad 2 has changed a whole lot since the first game. Everything from mechanics to storytelling to even just basic exploration of the game maps. I wanted to ask everyone to start off, how did y'all feel about the sequel? Better, worse, neither?
I would say it's like one of the biggest glow-ups in RPGs, or at least PS1 RPGs, like improvements from a sequel that you would get from a sequel for sure.
Yeah, I think my opinion changed overall for the better of the series just by playing this. It's night and day, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing how much they added and how much longer it is, because this game can last you anywhere from like 40 to 80 hours, depending on if you do all the side quests. How did y'all do with side questing? Did you get caught up in them, or did you eventually kind of have to shove them off to get as far as you could?
I eventually shoved them off after a certain point.
There is
Just
a point
to
in the
finish it.
game where like they stop giving you side quests for a while.
Yeah.
Luckily. They don't stop giving you like the wanted monsters though.
Yeah, they'll have you go after wanted monsters with like 2 characters in your party.
Oh my gosh, but like I just kept doing it. I was like instinctively looking at wanted posters every single time I hit up a hunter's guild.
Good source of money, good source of merit points.
I want to see what's in that door.
There's some good stuff in that door. I can
That
tell you that.
250-star door. I kept like turning stuff in and like looking at my points, and I'm like, man, I'm never gonna get this thing.
There are some of the best weapons in the game behind that door. It's a good place to go. Before we get in too deep into any one niche, let's talk a little bit about how the game has evolved since Elc the Lad 1. Maybe first and foremost, we can talk about combat, because combat was really almost all you had in Elc the Lad 1. And in Elc the Lad 2, it's but one of many different ways of playing the game. But even then, combat has changed a whole lot. There's new UI elements, there's picking your party, which is something you didn't really do in Elc the Lad 1. What did y'all think about the combat in this one?
I thought overall it was an improvement. I think like there was definitely kind of the bare bones of what they set up in Elc the Lad 1, and this kind of just built upon that. I did kind of think some of it was maybe a little superfluous, like the monsters.
Yeah, capturing monsters.
Yeah.
Like that just didn't seem like it was well thought out or integral to the game.
It feeds into a side game that comes with the Elc the Lad collection called Elc Arena, where you train and fight your monsters in a battle arena. And you can level them up there and take them back into your game. And it's this big elaborate thing that I never messed with more than like 20 minutes.
That seems like a bad idea. Why? Like, who greenlit that?
I don't
know
know
how
how
to make another game next to it where you, and it's like, wow.
I wonder when they came out. I should look this up.
Yeah, I mean, that's more common in Japan to have that kind of like side game or additional kind of game that you would sell maybe at a reduced price on the side that ties into the other one. Or, you know, I mean, some games even they would sell just like character models on a disc that you could look at in a model viewer and things like that. And this is definitely much more fully featured than that. But yeah, the monster collecting aspect of it is interesting. I don't know if it's I mean, Elc the Lad 2, I believe, came out in 97, right? So it would have been after Pokemon and came out in Japan. So I don't know if that was played a role in that, like that kind of influence, or is it just like Dragon Quest V influence or something? But it's neat that you can do it, but Pondit is so good that you don't really ever need to do it.
Yeah, Pondit was a good boy. He was probably my go-to monster.
There is
He
one
ruled.
point where you have just Lisa and a bunch of monsters, and I captured a couple just to have some at a decent level for her,
Oh yeah.
and that was the extent of my monster collecting this
And then
playground.
there's one extra dungeon where you have to have just monsters.
Oh,
for
that's
it.
right.
The
Yeah.
Mother Claire, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was an interesting dungeon. That was the only time I really collected monsters was for that one.
Yeah, that's the thing. There are all kinds of optional dungeons in this one, and that just wasn't really a thing in Arc the Lad 1. You had that one 50 level dungeon to go through to get Choco. In this one, there are like every area has at least one optional dungeon that you can go into.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's something like Mother Claire, where you're using your monsters, or going down to explore to get Choco yet again, or going to get all the power cells for your robot buddy Dykebeck, who we will talk about.
Yes.
Yes.
Actually, in this playthrough, I forgot to go back and get him from the island, so I got stuck like through like a large portion of the game without being able to go back and get him, and had to get him like really late.
Aw.
I did the same thing.
I ended up not getting Choco until like way later in the game.
Yeah, and she's got her own side quest where you can evolve her into like this angel of
Mhm.
death, basically.
Damn.
It's pretty neat. Her sprite changes and everything, which I absolutely love. I'm a sucker for visual changes in games. Speaking of visual changes, there are a lot of little touches in combat that I really liked. Like, it highlights the enemies that you will hit if you attack in a
Mhm.
certain direction. So, like, you know if you'll hit multiple enemies with something, you know the range of your different weapons. It's really useful because you can equip different weapons in this one. Each character can use a broad selection of weapon types.
Yeah, the UI improvements are huge in this game. Like, it's so much easier to know like what health and magic points your character's at, what the enemies, how strong the enemies are, what range your attacks are going to hit, and um, all that is just so much more clear based on the presentation this time around. So I think that's like a huge help. Like, Arc the Lad the first one feels very primitive in that way, and this one doesn't at all. I mean, it's just as good as any other PS1 RPG in that regard, I think.
The one thing that messed with me is as you level up your spells, you can actually cast them at the lower levels, and it shows that by default. You have to press left or right in order
Oh,
to
yeah.
adjust the levels. I went nearly halfway through the game without casting spells of any level higher than 1 before I remembered that this was a thing that you could do.
Yeah, because it shows you that, and then it shows you how much MP they're going to take up, right? And
Yeah.
yeah.
It's actually really nice to be able to like manage your MP by casting at lower
Mhm.
levels when you need to.
It's like Shining Force does that as well.
Yes, exactly. I've always compared these games favorably to Shining Force. I might have more love in my heart for Shining Force, but I think these hit a lot of the same
Yeah,
points, you know?
they are very similar in that you have that traditional like typical JRPG traveling between towns and taking quests and talking to people and world map and everything, but then all the battles are more strategy RPG. It really has that kind of same structure to it, which is nice.
And that exploration is something else that's new to this entry. There are cities to explore. There are people to talk to. There's a world map to go explore. Your airship can take you to all of these different areas. You can go in places out of order. There are occasionally, 2 branching paths you can choose, or you can go back to old places and see if there are quests waiting for you. There's just a lot more meat on the bone than there was in the first Arc the Lad.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest like improvements of this game over the first one, especially at the beginning of the game, because this one does so much more to like immerse you in the world that you're in. And in the first couple towns, there's so many different NPCs you can talk to, and a lot of them will know Elk, and they'll talk to him or reference things from his past or things like that. And he has a lot of like back and forth with characters, and it just makes him feel so much more robust as a character, and the world feel a lot more alive than it does in the first one.
There's even differing dialogue depending on who you have in the front of your party occasionally.
Oh yeah, like certain scenes you had to use certain characters to unlock them.
Mhm.
Yeah, like when you discover Sonya's secret, which we will get into. Or if you... go on ahead.
I was just gonna say, I noticed a lot of a lot of the NPCs, especially early on in the game, were very rude.
Yeah.
Like just going around Indigo's as Elk, and like people are just like, oh, look, it's you. Get out of here. It's like, what?
I wonder how much of that was accelerated by Working Designs translation, because we got another Working Designs
That's
one
true.
going here.
Yeah. Though I do think some of that it's supposed to be like that the hunters are kind of seen as like a, like kind of like guns for hire or whatever. They're not necessarily like, not everybody is like into them. And so he's getting kind of a chilly reception outside of his own town because people can tell like what his occupation is.
Oh, right, because they had the whole plot where him and the police officer didn't like him or something.
Mhm.
Yeah, they see them as something of competition or
That's right. That cop was so
vigilantes.
mad that
Yeah.
Elk was like besting him.
Yeah, it's very similar actually to like the Trails series where you have like the bracers and then they oftentimes have like kind of antagonistic relationship with the like whatever the authority is of whatever country that the game takes place in. It reminded me a lot of that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that.
I was thinking more Witcher just because like the bracers will sometimes like the local constabulatory, I don't know if that's the actual word, but would like go to the bracer guild if they needed more muscle. It was like, oh,
Mhm.
we're gonna work. It felt like they would actually work with them occasionally, whereas like Witchers were outright reviled. And I guess Elk isn't like outright reviled in areas that he's not from, but like just at least in Indigos, it felt like he was getting a lot of unnecessary hate. Whereas like Shu seems to be like, I would have Shu out and like nobody would say something extremely rude to him.
People don't mess with a ninja. But we should probably get into the story and introduce some of these characters, huh? We open on informing the player that this is going to be a much darker story than Ark the Lad 1. Because we open on a clan protecting the Fire Guardian from the first game from being captured by I'm about to call him Ansem.
Ansel.
Andel.
Or Andel, yeah,
Andel.
Andel.
I was about to
Ansel's
go
very funny.
by the villain Incel.
Yeah, Andel.
That's what I was thinking.
And all of the adults of the tribe that have kind of held and protected the Fire Clan are laid out, and trying to fight and stop them from being taken away. And then a young boy named Elk runs out in front of them and says, "No, please stop," and summons fire upon the enemies, but not before they open fire and take out pretty gruesomely. Like the sprite animation here is a big step up. But the adults in his life suffer pretty gruesome deaths by gunfire. That was like the two first things you notice are, one, this is going to be a lot darker than the first game, and two, man, the sprite animation really has seen some improvements. But after Elk uses his fire powers to take out the troops, he exhausts himself, passes out because he's a little boy trying to use big magic. And they say that they will take Elk to the facility, which will be a big part of the first third of the game. But from there, Elk wakes up and is an adult, and lo and behold, we have a new main character. Ark the Lad is nowhere to be found. We instead have Elk, a hunter for the Hunters Guild, who can summon fire at will. What did y'all think of Elk as a protagonist? He's definitely a different breed than Ark.
Yeah, I really like Elk. I think in a lot of ways he is kind of a stereotypical like RPG protagonist, but he has a lot of moments to kind of show his personality He's, you know, a little cocky on the surface. You get the sense that he's like projecting a kind of strength, even though on the inside he's very like vulnerable and has all these, you know, he's plagued by these nightmares of what happened to his family and what happened to him when he was being experimented on. And so you get the sense that that's kind of a front to kind of hide the things that are troubling him inside. And he's also very like um, it, I would say like a little introspective in a way that you maybe don't always see from like a teenage boy RPG protagonist. There's a really good moment later in the game where he, after some events happen, he does kind of some risky maneuvers, and then Shu goes missing, and he has this moment where he's so guilt ridden over the idea that his right kind of reckless behavior might have killed his friend. And you know, it's not something that you always see in games like this, especially from this time. So I thought that was like a really kind of touching moment, and gets into like some more of the deeper aspects of his character.
Yeah, he runs the risk of being an edgy protagonist, but never quite fully falls into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kept waiting for more edge.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad he never showed it. Although that does mean by the end of the game he's a much more generic kind of let's go help the people protagonist. I'm kind of glad that for how much darker this game was, they didn't let him dig too deep into angst and.
I felt like he was a little kid through most of the game. Like
Yeah,
both
he
with his
seems younger.
design. Yeah. And I'm not a huge fan of his like his design. Like yeah, man, I think he looks like he wears bell bottoms.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah,
that
he
like
does kind
really
of.
bothered me.
Yeah, the
throughout the
sprite.
entire playthrough. Like the
Yeah.
sprite, ugh.
Yeah, in the art he's kind of Native American coded.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the fire sprite, the fire spirit is kind of has that kind of design too. I don't know if that's like why they went with that, but yeah, he does kind of have that look to him.
Does not necessarily translate to his in-game
Right.
sprite, though.
No.
Especially with like the straight up anime hair that was
Yeah.
popular at the time.
Yeah, and he has the bandana and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
Still love my boy Elc. He's a weirdo.
I like him, but like I could have loved him and they just wouldn't let me
Because of the bell bottoms.
because of the bell bottoms.
So Elk is woken up in the middle of the night. Yes, and he is woken up by a man named Link saying, "Hey, we've got a hunter job for you, middle of the night. We need you to go to the skyport because a terrorist wants the skyport shut down." And he's meant to go in and deal with the terrorist. So he goes in his airship to break in there, which is kind of cool. He's got an airship named the Heian that has a scary face drawn on the balloon, which delights me to no end.
That's a nice detail.
And he kind of airdrops into the skyport, and the terrorist is one of those ninja enemies from the first game. In most respects, it's got some hair instead of a hood, but we definitely see a lot of sprite reuse from the first game, as well as a whole bunch of new ones that also get reused quite a bit. It is a classic RPG, and that colors change, you know they got stronger. But he basically gives chase to this guy after defeating him as he runs off to an airship, and Elk runs into the airship too, and very quickly runs into a woman with a tamed wolf monster, which is, we're told, is not common to be able to tame monsters in this world. The girl, as we'll learn, is named Lisa, and is your source of monster collecting, as we were discussing a little bit earlier. She's the one who can capture monsters, and she can speak to them, and basically has this deep connection that makes her someone with a special power in this world. Lisa also acts as your first healer in the game, as well as having access to a few different relatively powerful weapons. She's not like Kukuru levels of the girl is the healer. I guess she's got some physical power behind her.
Earth magic too, so she can do
Oh yeah, she can do earthquake, which is pretty good.
Yeah. Lisa is definitely your female protagonist and potentially love interest for Elk. I don't know that they ever like fully go through with it, but they hint at it a whole awful lot.
Yeah, and it's much better developed.
She's allowed to be her own existence, which is a big step up from Arc the Lad 1's treatment of its one female character.
Yep. She has her own arc and her own, part of the story where you're just playing as her, and they just have a lot of neat little moments where you kind of see their relationship blossom a bit, and the way they interact and open up to each other is, I think, really nice and really well done. Even compared to a lot of other RPGs at the time, I think it's pretty well done and well written.
Yeah, her whole arc is based partially around her powers and the persecution that comes with them. Basically, she is sought by seemingly the same group of people that took Elk to quote unquote the facility, which we'll get into pretty soon here.
The New York mobsters.
New York mobsters, the Cabal. Lots of use guys, and
there's like way too much of that in this game.
Those guys love them some gabagool. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And like the hilarious part is they're monsters. So like my take on that is that monsters like studied through movies how to pretend to be human, and they only watch mobster movies.
Yeah, that's why they all wear the trench coat and like fedora look and everything. Yeah.
They're like, we'll fit right in. And like nobody else looks like this.
Nobody else talks like this. So yeah, after taking out the terrorist who pleads, begs and pleads and says, I need help because the Cabal will kill me if I fail. And then that immediately happens. There's a gunshot, he falls, and the aforementioned Cabal comes in, hunting for the girl. She agrees to go with them, but Elk has a flashback of escaping the facility with some girl named Maribel, and that kind of encourages him to, well, I should help this person. And he does. He helps her escape by sliding from one airship to another, basically.
Yeah, the whole opening sequence is very cool. Like,
it's very action-packed.
Yeah, he like jumps through a window to like get the jump on the terrorist, and then they go onto the airship, and then they have the battle on top of the airship, and then they jump to his airship. It's like very like big set piece kind of thing going on, which is cool.
It is actually, like, for a PS1 game, about as action-packed as you get for an opening scene. This side of, like, FF7's bombing mission.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, Lisa gets shot in the escape. So Elk takes him to his ninja friend, Shu, who we spoke about briefly. Shu is another hunter who is a bit older and more experienced than Ark, and helps him, says, hey, you need to find this Dr. Lotto who will be able to help her from her gunshot wound.
Yeah, he's like a mentor figure, I think, for Elk, kind of.
Yeah. Kind of like a big brother almost, or something.
Mm-hmm. Shu is interesting because his weapon types include like shoes for kicking, like a ninja, and machine guns, which is slightly
like
less
a ninja.
Like a ninja, like a ninja would do.
Let me just tell you, Wes, that ninjas are actually masters of all forms of combat. So,
so guns are included in this.
Guns are included in this, yeah.
Maybe it's gun fu. Maybe it's gun kata. Shu is a very cool looking character.
Yeah.
He's got like silver
hair. Tosh to me. He's like the cool, like edgy badass kind of the party.
He's nowhere near as strong as Tosh, because Tosh is ridiculously overpowered in physical strength, but he is very much the cool character of the new characters. He's even got like the silver hair. He's got a little bit of Kakashi going on.
Oh yeah, I was about to say that. I was like, no.
Yeah, and he's got the headband too and stuff, like the ninja headband. Yeah.
Yeah, it is very classic traditional ninja, though he doesn't really act like one in any way. He like doesn't talk about training in ninjutsu much. He was trained as an assassin, as we'll learn later, but he's more of like a pragmatic guy. He's very much He takes care of business, and
Yeah, he's kind of the level head in the party, I would
Yes.
say. Yeah.
yeah, that mentor figure thing kind of sticks with him throughout. So Elk goes and gets Dr. Lotto, who is a drunk. There's plenty of like little fights scattered throughout this, and I'm gonna probably skip over those because this is a big old game, and we've only got a little bit of time to talk about it. Yeah, this is when Elk finally learns that her name is Lisa, and learns that she was bound for the facility due to her ability to capture and talk to animals. And Ark saved her in the middle of that.
You don't want to talk about like the 7 bounties you get to go into the sewers in Indigos?
Yeah, Elk needs some jobs, so you go and do a bunch of jobs, like 3 of which take you into the sewers of Indigos.
Well,
I can't believe how
he
often
needs
I was in down there.
He needs money to get the information from Shantae in the bar. I think that this is like also going on. So that's like why the story reason for why you want to do all the hunter missions. Yeah.
And Shantae is oddly enough your next party member as well. After a few more scenes happen.
Well, they take the Heian, and before Shantae becomes your teammate, they take the Heian out to chase after Ark.
Well, they give
Yes.
first, so she gives you information that there's some kind of plan taking place with unveiling this statue. And so they go to intervene with that, and then basically like Andel and the Cabal were going to use the statue as like a technology device to like sap everybody's magic power or something. It's not super clear, but that's when like Ark shows up and like destroys it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that plays into their whole narrative that he's a fugitive.
Yeah.
From the first game and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is still an outlaw, and Elk believes him to be one of the reasons why his tribe was killed.
Yeah, because they used the Silver Noah, because Andel used the Silver Noah to take to his village, and now Ark has the Silver Noah to use for his own purposes. So he sees the airship and is like, "Oh, that's the airship that destroyed my village," or whatever. Yeah.
So Elk actually spends a good portion of this game hating Ark and like seeking out revenge on him, which is actually what leads him to be too reckless at times, chasing after Ark, which is I think a nice little curve on the story where like you're coming at it from a completely different angle. You're still good guys, but you're not trying to save the world yet.
And it's a good point towards Shu being the more level-headed one, because he's warning Elk the entire time, like, "Hey, you can't go this fast, dude.
Yeah,
you're gonna break the ship."
In the mix of this, Andel is actually called one of the 4 great generals of Romalia as well, which is the hint at something bigger than just Andel being the one in charge of this kind of Romalian takeover that's been going on.
Yeah, they kind of tell you that like the Cabal is working with Romalia and Andel, and they're all like in cahoots to do something.
Something nefarious.
Something nefarious. And this is when Ark pushes the airship too hard trying to chase after the Silver Noah, and actually crash lands it on an island inhabited by a Dr. Vilmer. This is a somewhat problematic island.
Extremely.
Yes.
lightly put, a somewhat problematic island, as it's this white guy who has enriched the lives of all of these quote unquote lower intelligence natives,
and boy do they act it.
Yes. Broken speech, lots of being amazed by indoor plumbing,
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. And I'm not sure how much of that is the working designs or how much of it is the original text, but it's not great.
Dr. Vilmer is kind of a standoffish dude, but he has a granddaughter, and she goes missing. And what do you know? You're the only real help there as combat hardened. At this point, you are just Elk and Lisa. Shu has gone missing. And he will be missing for a while.
Well, good news for Dr. Vilner, because 2 JRPG protagonists just landed right in his lap.
Throughout this, Elk can have a number of dreams about his past and ends up remembering most of what happened. Being in this,
because that
go
was
on.
part of the thing too, is like he's lived all this time as a hunter, but he doesn't really remember like what happened in the facility. He doesn't really remember a lot of like what happened before. So like we
Right.
know that he's kind of experienced that, but he's only got like bits and pieces of it.
But throughout this, we find out, in addition to Maribel, he had a friend named Ginny. Jeannie?
Mm-hmm.
Guinea? It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Just keep guessing.
I'm going to go through all the options, and it's a choose your own adventure. We find out that the facility is called White House,
Mm-hmm.
and that is run by Galarno, who is another one of the 4 great generals and the leader of the Cabal. He is also a mafia guy, but he doesn't have the fedora. He has well-coiffed hair.
Classic.
Just to make him stand out, and a strong moustache. And by the end of your time here in this island, you have a pretty good picture of what happened to Elk after being captured, taken to this facility, experimented on, tried to escape. Maribel got left behind as he was trying to escape with her. And he was the only one to get out. And after that, he started his life as a hunter pretty quick after, under the tutelage of Shu, who helped him out. But after they've done this, Dr. Vilmer reveals that he was actually the lead researcher at White House. So the Cabal actually comes by and tries to put the screws to him to get him back. But of course, you've got 2 JRPG protagonists on your hands, so they don't quite make it away with him. And in return, he repairs your ship and upgrades it a fair bit, which we'll kind of learn more about the upgrades as we get farther in. But that allows Elk and Lisa, after having tried to find Shu a little bit and having no luck, to return to Indigos.
And this is also too on the island. When you save his granddaughter from the dungeon, that's where you run into Deekbeck.
Yes, that is a good call. Deekbeck is a robot from an ancient time. And you find him kind of stuck in the wall, and you get a power unit for him, and he's able to break out of the wall. And Dr. Vilmer says, you know what? I'm going to repair this guy. Come back sometime, and I will gift him to you. I don't know when we want to talk about coming back, because I'm not sure when exactly you can come back.
Yeah, the earliest is like pretty much once you get back to the continent and you get Shu back, then you can go straight back and he'll
Really?
be ready. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's way earlier than I
Wow.
did.
Yeah.
And I love the design of Dykebeck, because he is, when you see him, he is this scary skeleton-ass looking robot. But Dr. Vilmer builds a wooden shell around him that kind of makes him look like a stove.
Yeah.
Like a walking stove.
He almost looks like the Tin Man a little bit from like Wizard of
Yeah.
Oz. Yeah.
And there's definitely a little bit of that to his story there. But yeah, he was this ancient and powerful robot used to defend the 7 Braves in the past, which is something that we kind of touched on in the last game. The idea that there were 7 people who had done this. The original sealing of the Dark One, some time ago. And he was built to protect them, and now he's a funny walking little Tin Man stovepipe made of wood, who is used for a lot of comic relief, but also a lot of exposition that you can totally miss if you don't go pick him up.
Yeah.
So we go back to Indigos, and we find Shantae. And in pretty short order, we find out that she's betrayed us, and she sends the Cabal after us. But the reason that she's betrayed us is that they presumably have her brother.
Yeah.
And she is doing all this to save her brother. So she secretly sends the Cabal after you, and then takes you to Galarno's mansion, saying, "Hey, I can get you in." Where you are ambushed, you fight a fake Galarno. But Shantae finds out that the terrorist from the Skyport that the Cabal killed was her brother. It's one of many very dark turns where, like, you're constantly running into places where you don't get to save people in time. There are people that you think that you're going to be able to save, and they're just, it's rare that you get a
They've been
chance
dead.
to.
Mm-hmm.
They've
been
been
dead the whole time.
Yeah, and Elk feels a lot of guilt because he feels like responsible for
Yeah.
her brother dying. Yeah,
even though he's totally not.
right.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Like how you experience that and how you, you know.
Well, because he was there and he was like took the job to like subdue him or whatever. So he's, you know, he feels like he's like played a part in you know, her suffering basically.
Yeah, Elk is also experiencing survivor's guilt as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
right?
big
Like
time.
with every person that dies, that he believes he should have been able to save.
Yeah.
So this is when Shantae joins. And Shantae is a pretty sweet party member because she's your second healer, but she actually gets revive, which turns out to make her the best healer, arguably.
Yeah,
Is
she's pretty
Galerno's mansion like the first dungeon, like real dungeon you kind of get into? Where,
Well,
I guess
yeah.
it's not the first dungeon, but
There's
it's
the
like
one
the
on
first.
the island, but
Yeah, but it's like the first multi-room. Because the
Yeah,
dungeon on the island feels a lot like the dungeon in the first game.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
Galerno's house is kind of like a open floor plan almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the first one that has like rooms where you can go in and there's just a battle, so it's like a trap almost. And
Yeah.
sometimes you find treasure.
Yep.
Which is actually pretty cool. Like, these get a lot more complex as time goes
Mhm.
on. But this is really your first encounter with dungeon design to a degree, in Arc the Lad 2. And I'm glad you brought it up, because that is one of the big differences between Arc the Lad 1 and Arc the Lad 2, is that there are a lot more opportunities to kind of control your character and explore and do puzzles and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we were comparing, you know, the game to Shining Force before, but this is a way that it's like very different even from Shining Force, is that you have these like elaborate you know, typical like JRPG dungeons, but just with like SRPG battles sprinkled within, which is a really neat kind of setup. And there's not really a lot of games that I feel like that really do that. So it kind of gives it like a unique feel compared to a lot of other games of this type.
And it introduces one of the other big differences between this and Arc the Lad 1, is that you only heal if you rest at an inn. You don't heal in between battles. So you actually have to manage your MP and HP as you're exploring these dungeons.
Yeah, that's true. Resource management is like a really big part of this game. Yeah.
Because magic apples don't grow on trees.
No, they don't. So you end up buying a lot of healing items to try to use in between battles, or at least I did.
No, I did. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't want to run Shantae and Lisa out of MP instantly.
Yeah, I found that if you need, like, I only use them to heal if I had like multiple units that needed healing that were next to each other. Otherwise, I would just use items.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in between all this, we are regularly throughout like the first third of this game seeing cutaways to Ark's party still, you know, doing their good work, as it seems. They talk about a mind control plan from Andel that they need to stop. They also, at this point in the game, learn of an accelerated monster factory plan run by Andel and set off to dismantle it. Monster Factory, not the series by the McElroy brothers, but rather
Yeah. And that's what leads them into you know, meeting up with Elk's party.
Yeah, this sets up a collision course between Elk and Ark.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, I think these moments where you see Ark and his group kind of gallivanting across the globe and you know, in their secret hideout where they're planning how they're going to strike back at the villains and stuff, I think is what really makes it worth playing the first game. Even though this is such an improvement, I think that you get so much more out of those scenes and the interactions with the original party because you've played the first game. Like, it's just so cool to like see them show up again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Chungara
if
is
you
back.
Oh,
Yeah,
Chungara.
Though I do think his like characterization and writing is like a little better in this one than it
Yeah,
is in the original.
I'd
It
agree
feels
with
like
that.
he's kind
Yeah.
of running the A team here.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you, Audra.
Oh no, I was just saying it was kind of, I can't imagine really playing this without having played the first game, just because I'm like, I'd be like, who are these people?
Yeah, they're almost brought up without context, even. Like if you hadn't played the first game, like who is Goken, who is Changara,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they never tell you.
Yeah, you just know that Ark's a bad dude. Goes from Ark the Lad to Ark the Bad. You're welcome.
God. That's actually something I think is a thing with the series, is naming your main character something close to Ark. Like Elk kind of fits in that same space, especially realizing in Japanese L and R are the same
the L and R,
sound.
yeah. Yeah.
And then in the third game you get an Alec, and then in the
Yes.
fourth game one of the main characters is named Dark the Lad.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I swear they do it,
And
on
it's
purpose.
spelled D-A-R-C, right?
D-A-R-C.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
right. I remember that.
So after this, Elk and crew know the way to White House, so they head there, hoping to save Marielle, who I'm sure I've called Maribel twice. But no, the name is Marielle. I wrote it down and everything. And this is where things get even darker. Because you invade White House, you go through another dungeon here, and you eventually do find Marielle, who leads you to the playroom that you've seen in flashbacks. And it is a room filled with kids, and Galarno and Andel are watching from an observation room up above. And sure enough, after taunting the heroes a little bit, they turn all the kids into monsters that you have to fight and kill. Things get unpleasant in Ark the Lad 2.
Yeah.
This is maybe one of the darkest turns that it takes in showing those kids transforming into monsters and everything. Yeah, there's like no way to sugarcoat it. It is a kind of disturbing thing, even in PS1 era graphics.
Yeah, and then you have to fight them, and then after you win, they drop Marielle and Elk into like a pit and force them to fight against each other.
Yeah, Marielle is mind controlled through technology that we will get to learn even more and more in the near future.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's related to the technology they were doing with the statue at the beginning, but
I think so.
Yeah,
from what I gathered. But yeah, Elk is forced to kill Marielle. And we didn't mention this back at Galarno's place, but that's where he fights Ginny too, isn't it?
Yeah, they bring her out and have her turn into a monster she was, there's like a monster called the Slasher
Slasher
like a serial killer in Indigos, and then it turns out that it's her, and so you have to fight her.
Elk's friend Ginny, also from White House. So at this point, he's killed his two best friends from White House, and the reason that he was kind of keeping going. So the survivor's guilt is really kicked up to another level at this point.
Them making her the Slasher was already pretty messed up, but like the way that she talks to Elk, like how she's telling him what to do and like telling him to like just submit and stuff like that, or the opposite when she tells him to I may be confusing this with another part, but doesn't she like warn him not to go to White House or something like that? Because the first time we see Slasher is in the apartment. She's apartment,
right? Yeah, there's like moments where she like regains her like sanity or whatever, but unfortunately he still has to kill her. So
yeah.
And basically everywhere the heroes go is a trap in this game.
Yes.
Yeah, I noticed that.
There are two really striking things: the heroes walking into traps and load-bearing bosses.
But I do think that the that kind of works with like the plot, you know, because they're
Yeah.
fighting against this like overarching shadowy like cabal organization that's like has their like fingers everywhere. Then it kind of makes sense for them to constantly be going into traps, and you do kind of buy into like how powerful the villains are by having those situations repeat like constantly.
And then when the traps fail, Andel says, "Ah, well, alas, I still have control in this situation."
Yes.
Right through the end of the game, every failed trap is like, "Ah, but I still have this."
You thought you were done. No, yeah.
Everything is a Xanatos gambit. After Elk kills Marielle, she explodes. She explodes. She is rigged to explode, so she explodes and nearly kills Elk. And is saved by Ark's crew coming in and trying to shut down this whole situation.
They just crashed their airship right into the
right into the playroom
into the
there.
facility. Yep.
And Ark uses his super guardian power to bust Elk out of, being trapped below and pulls him up. Changara thinks that Galarno is probably heading to Romalia and the main Chimera base there. Ark tries to chase after Andel, but Andel gets away in what looks like a black silver Noah, which seems like it would have more significance than it ends up actually having. It's just his airship. It just looks like the silver Noah, but evil. But you keep thinking there's going to be some build up to this, or at least I did. Maybe I'm alone here.
Well, no, it just feels like it's like, oh, actually, the kingdom had a second airship, and that's the one he's using, or whatever.
Yeah. That's the big twist. We had 2 airships. At this point, she wants to go to Romalia while Elk recovers under the care of Kukuru back in Toville. We see Kukuru again, this time in robes. They actually changed how Changara and Kukuru, the 2 characters you get back that you can't use to fight, they changed how they look. Gave them a new sets of clothes. So Kukuru teleports Shu and Shantae to Palencia so that they can catch an airship to Romalia, while Lisa stays with Elk and tries to help him recover. Because as they say, at this point, it's just up to him to recover. It's whether his mental faculties hold up.
Yeah, because she heals his physical wounds, but she can't heal his like mental wounds.
His heart.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's pretty much how it goes.
Yeah.
So Shu and Shantae go on ahead and get snuck into a Romalia battleship. Where they find the Heian and steal it. Shu steals it right back. Unfortunately, in the process of doing this is another this airship is another dungeon. It's the first one that's kind of labyrinthine and has some pseudo puzzles to it.
Yeah, there's a bit of that in White House with like the flip switching and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it does a good job of making each dungeon a little bit more complicated than the last. Although some of them, it might be to its detriment.
Yeah.
But Shu gets away on the Heian, and Shantae gets blown overboard off of an airship. But is somehow rescued by a man named Gruga and his blind daughter, Elena. Gruga pretty quickly reveals that he's not Elena's real dad. He's this big, thick guy in a loincloth.
He's almost like a caveman, kind of.
Yeah. Although, to Working Design's credit, he doesn't speak like a caveman or anything. He's
he's
well
white.
spoken. He's tanned. He's nicely tanned.
I thought it was hilarious that like he's like finds Shantae on the beach.
Yeah, she's fine. She's just on the beach. And Gruga is like this huge. I know that all the character models are the same size, but he looks huge. Like they have rendered this guy to look like an absolute stack of man.
Yeah, he's a real beef castle.
He's a real beef castle. And his walking loop is like this big stomping kind of movement. I really appreciate the sprite work in Arc the Lad too, especially for all the new characters. But because we focused on him so much, Gruga is, yes, another party member that you get, who can use things like axes and poles. He is probably the next closest thing to Tosh when it comes to being a physical powerhouse. He's up there. Maybe he and Iga are kicking around the same playing ground.
Like if they let Iga use like something cool as a weapon instead of just his fists.
Yes, exactly. If they let Iga whip around an axe or two.
Yeah, and then you also get to, this also introduced at least me to like the ability to attack from like an angle kind of with a weapon.
Yes.
Yeah, Shantae has access to clubs, which can also do that.
Yeah.
But you only get like one club before this point, so you may not have like experimented with that at all.
Shantae with the club is also hysterical.
Yeah.
Like, why did they give her access to these enormous clubs? But it rules.
Yeah, it's nice. It gives her a lot more utility because her other weapon is like her feet, like Shu has, but I feel like she's a lot weaker with those. But the clubs give her some nice like physical damage.
Because she has to take off her high heels and beat you with them.
That's my favorite animation in the game, maybe. Is when she goes full LeChonkla with it.
That's another thing that's like wildly improved from the first game, is just how many different animations there are for like the extra attacks. Where it's and it's definitely like an anime thing where it's like the more elaborate the attack, the more damage you do. But it's like everybody has some really cool animations.
I like the little touch long. That when Elc attacks, he's usually lighting things on fire. Whether it's like the enemy with gouts of flame popping up, or him lighting up the spear or sword or whatever. There's a lot of character to the animations in this one.
Yeah.
But Gruga... go ahead.
Oh, and like Lisa twirls around with her whip.
Yes. Lisa with whips is great.
I did want to point out with Lisa that like one thing that they did really well with her is that all of her animations are very graceful.
Yes.
You know, like down to the point where when she levels up, she kind of does like a pirouette.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, they all have a lot of personification, like with their animations and everything that you didn't quite get. Well, you get a little bit in the first game, like Poco especially has a lot of that, but I feel like they applied that same like idea to all the characters this time around
instead of just Poco.
Yeah.
And even then, Poco gets some better animations in this one. Some of his symbol animations are killer in this game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his abilities look a lot better too. Like he doesn't just
really do.
He doesn't just hop on the drum. He like, he hops on and like beats it in a more elaborate way than, I guess that sounded bad, but
we're all picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah.
Gruga, as it turns out, is fighting in a tournament to get the money to fix Elena's sight. And he wins the tournament and decides to leave with Elena to help leave with Shantae before she gets her vision back, to help with the Chimera Lab issues going on. Gruga has this big pathos about how he can't bear Elena to find out at a glance that, oh, that's definitely not my dad. So he decides to leave before she gets her vision back, and leaves her in the care of the innkeeper, who's been kind of a bro this whole time. It's kind of depressing, and it's gonna lead to him having more problems than not later. Like, you can see written on the wall, this isn't gonna end well. But they're off to find a Chimera Lab, at which point we switch back to Lisa. Lisa is tending to Elc, but Kukuru's like, nah, girl, you gotta handle your own baggage. You got your own stuff going on. You need to take care of that if you want to be any help to anyone. And sends Lisa off to her hometown of Holn, which is really where like you get a big arc for Lisa. The story of her home is honestly one of the more affecting stories throughout the course of this game, because you come back here as well. Her hometown, Holn, is blocked by a big rock, so she goes into the nearby city to find some help moving the rock, and no one is willing to help her. And eventually, after she exhausts all of her options, the police find her and say, hey, you're one of those witches from Holn. We're going to arrest you and execute you. And she doesn't have much to stop that from happening. luckily, she gets thrown in a cell. Next door, you see a familiar old man with a great long gray beard. As Gauguin is in the cell next to her, and they're both rescued by a young boy that Lisa saved outside the Rocks to Holm, who was being attacked by monsters. Kid's name is Leitz, I believe. Is
Yep.
that right?
Yeah, Leeds.
That's right.
Leitz. He breaks into the the police station, finds the key, and breaks them both out. And so she returns to Holm because Gauguin promises, I can take care of that rock. And sure enough, Gauguin can take care of that rock. He's got some big bad magic still. If you import your saves from the first game, you actually get to keep all your levels that you applied to your characters from the first game when you reacquire them in this game, which is pretty neat. Although, if you're like me, Ark is the only character you had at max level, and some of them maybe would have been better not having
I think
the levels I left them with.
I think Poco will automatically be like level 45, but I had him at like in the 20s, so
Me too.
he was actually like way underpowered from what he was supposed to be. So
Poco didn't get much experience from a strength drum and a speed ocarina every fight.
Mhm.
So that was basically all he did in my game. I've heard people say that even in Ark the Lad 2, he's still a pretty solid character if you train him up right, but I didn't use him. I used all the overpowered characters pretty much. After you get into Holm, you find that the whole place is overrun by monsters. One of which tells them all of the townspeople are at a secret lab that you'll never find, and then runs off. And then you see the world map, and you see a wall open in the mountain right next to Holm, and you see him run into it, and then the mountain closes. And oh, it's such a big mystery where you're supposed to go next. So you go to the secret lab. And surely enough, Leitz follows again, even though Lisa has been telling him this whole time, don't follow me, you're a child, you're going to get killed, don't follow me. Leitz follows along in the shadows. And this is where you have Lisa and a whole bunch of monsters as your only real party member options. Chungara gives you Mofly, Kelak, and does he give you Raijin and Fujin at this point?
No, I think
No.
you get them later.
Okay. Mofly, Kelak, and Hemo-G he gives you. Which you can use like other monsters, but I just went and captured a couple of others as I was going through this. Got a cool dragon. He was neat. And after she fights the lead researcher at the secret lab, Leitz comes out and reveals himself and reunites Lisa with her grandpa. Gauguin says that this is just one lab in a network, and it's time to take down more of them. And that's where we end our time with Lisa, promising that, hey, there are more Chimera labs. We're going to go deal with them. And that's kind of the arc that we're in right here. From here, we go back to Elc, and we delve into his subconscious. His mom and dad and Jenny and Marielle, and decides, I'm going to live my life to avenge them. And this is treated like a positive mental change. This game occasionally goes into revenge as an honorable reason to live your life, and I'm not sure I agree with that. I'm not sure I feel great about that, but that's what the game says. So Kukuru tells Elk that Ark saved him, which Elk immediately refuses to believe. So she sends him to Valencia Castle to learn the truth, where he meets Poco, and we have Poco back from here on. Of course, there are monsters all over the place, but in the basement, he meets the Fire Guardian, who tells him the truth about all the things that we said before happened to the Fire Guardian. And he decides, okay, well, he learns about the Toville villagers being trapped in Palencia Tower, so they go and bust him out. Simple as that. Another dungeon comes through. Elk and Poco bust out the villagers, and Elk heads out on the Silver Noah to the Chimera Lab to save Lisa, who seems like she's in a trap of some kind in the next Chimera Lab. Then we finally switch to Shu, like 8 hours later. Throughout here, there are lots of times when you go a really long time without being able to save as well, which is something I needed to point out.
Oh yeah.
This is an old school game with save points, and not all the dungeons have save points. Because the save points are all journals, and they only put them in places where it would make sense to have journals. So if you're in a dungeon where it wouldn't make sense for someone to camp out, you're out of luck. But Shu is in Hufian on the Romalian border. This place has kind of cool music. It's kind of weird industrial tech music. There's a lot of talk about a resistance in the town, and who do you find heading it up? But good old Tosh. We are quickly getting the old crew back together as we go through here.
Yeah, and you have to fight Tosh to actually get him to throw you in the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you get a one-on-one fight with Tosh, which thankfully Tosh is not strong as he is as a character, or else she would not have a chance. They decide, in order to break into Romalia, they are going to investigate the train tunnel as a potential way to get into Romalia.
Yeah, it shows a lot of forethought on the devs' part that they paired Tosh and Shu together.
Yeah.
To have like the coolest characters like have their own little adventure.
It makes you feel better about the fact that you don't have a healer for the first time in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it threatened to be a little tricky at times, but Tosh is just too strong. It's not really a problem for him.
Yeah, but he also takes a lot of damage.
Yeah, he's a berserker for sure.
Yeah.
It's even worse when someone has magic up against Tosh, because he can't resist that for nothing.
Yeah, and they send a few guys with magic up against Tosh.
Mm-hmm. So they get ambushed when they go to this train yard. A boy who wants to join the resistance has followed them.
Danny.
Danny, thank you. I was about to get lost in notes. And they tell Danny to run, and he does. Only he runs back to the resistance headquarters, only to be followed by a bunch of monsters, and the resistance is wiped out. Everyone, including Danny, seems to be dead, and Tosh and Shu are not super happy about that. We do a quick scene with the four generals and their master, where they reveal that Ark and company are descendants of the Seven from long, long ago. Galarno reveals that he's captured Iga thanks to a hunter. And the hunter is introduced, and Galarno says, hey, I want you to kill Ark's friends when they come visit, try to rescue Iga. Galarno also expresses a wish to take over the martyr plan from Andel, which is something we hear whispered of. We don't really get a full rundown as to what the martyr plan is yet. And I think it's revealed kind of awkwardly. Is that just me?
No, I think you're right.
They occasionally speak to it as something different than the mind control plan, but no, it kind of is the mind control plan, but it also involves these other towers.
Yeah. I think the story in the game definitely gets a lot messier after you defeat Galerno. And, you know, a lot of that stuff, it just kind of feels like it takes somewhat of a backseat to just like throwing more dungeons at you.
Yeah. Yeah, and the dungeons get more and more complicated, more and more endurance runs, more and more no time without saving, which is bad for me.
Yeah.
This is a difficult game to play with kids, I will say. Not because like the subject matter, they won't catch most of it because it's PS1 sprite graphics and it doesn't get too gnarly at points, but not being able to save for hours at a time can be pretty rough.
Yeah, definitely play with like an emulator with save states is a good way. It's a good way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Alternative methods are approved. We get a quick scene where Shu and Tosh bomb the train tunnel so that they can sneak in to Romalia via the tunnel and to the Chimera Labs. And it's actually pretty cool. You play as Tosh for a while and get to spend as many turns as you want delaying the enemies by just fighting and endlessly repeating group of enemies, and that impacts when you're activating the bombs as Shu, how many reinforcements come and when they come. I went the full 20 turns with Tosh, so after the initial enemies came up, I saw nothing with Shu. It took way less than 20 turns to activate all the bombs.
I did 30 turns just to see what would happen.
Oh my goodness.
Just because like Tosh was such a force to reckon with that like they're just what like the enemies had no chance.
It's a really cool set piece, I think. And they do a good job of like sprinkling these kind of things in where they kind of change up the gameplay and kind of use the characters that you're given at the time to their fullest.
Yeah, this really does feel like they're utilizing each character to do something they're really good at, with Shu's really high movement, making it easy for him to get to the bombs and activate them, and with Tosh's overall ridiculous power being well suited to fending off hordes of monsters. But then we pretty quickly switch between all of our people. Gogan and Lisa are heading into Hufian. Shantae and Gruga show up at the Skyport. Elk and Poco show up on the Noah. And then we switch to Iga, who breaks out of prison. All of these party members unite in a Chimera factory, in the main Chimera factory, I believe, and end up fighting clones of the other party members just nonstop throughout here. They just keep running into clones of the other parties grouped up, who, act like, hey, we found you, let's move together, and then ambush. Eventually, Iga finds and destroys the clone machine. And everyone reunites, and you finally have a proper party for like the first time in the game. You have a nice full party.
Yeah, it's very climactic.
Yes.
To finally have everybody together, and like you're fighting this villain that you've been, seeing the entire, like, orchestrating everything behind the scenes, and it's a very satisfying kind of initial climax.
Yeah, and this kind of puts an end to the idea of the Chimera factories here, as they all, go and collide with Galarno, who turns into a big freaky monster with a bunch of little gooey parts to defeat. You beat him, you kill Galarno, and while you've technically put an end to the Chimera plan, that technology is pretty well established in the Empire, and for the rest of the game, you're going to be fighting people who are transforming into monsters. You just got to be comfortable with that. But it feels like a victory. It feels like you've shut something down. Yeah, then we've still got 3 generals to deal with. So Chingara says there's something bad happening in Gratian, and we must go there. And this is kind of the last story bit and the last recruitable character before we start getting into towers and towers on towers on towers. Milmana is invading Gratian, headed up by General Yagan and his good old monkey. When you go to the Enidar temple, your last party member, a woman named Sania, a fortune teller of sorts, promises info on the enemy for a look at the Enidar scripture, which Iga says no to. It's blasphemy for anyone else to look on it. The king of Gratian comes and asks Amidar to submit to Milmana, say it's the only way that Yagan will spare the rest of the country. Everyone else kind of sees through this and finally decide, okay, Sania, we'll show you the scripture. Go to the library, and what do you know? It's been stolen. So you have to go find and get back the scripture, and finally go to the border and fight off monsters to stop the invasion with your new crew, including Sanya. Did any of you use Sanya too much?
I used her on occasion when they had to force the party into 2 groups.
Mm-hmm.
Later on. Her transfer ability is pretty good.
Transfer is what makes her amazing, theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
Because she can just take her turn and say, nah, this belongs to one of the other party members. So she's basically a duplicate of your best party member.
Think like times. A dancer for Fire Emblem.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is why everyone loves the dancers in Fire Emblem, too. It just... Here we go. Tosh attacks twice a turn. Good luck, everybody. Sania's fortune telling tells them that there is trouble at Brachia and Forless. And this is when you start going after mind control towers. Basically, the Romalia is building all of these mind control towers all over the place. And they're trying to take over the world that way by essentially making everyone into mindless slaves, which is a questionable world conquering plot, but I don't know. They seem to think that that'll be an okay world to rule.
Yeah, and this is where the game opens up a ton too.
Yeah, you start with Brachia and Forless, which you can tackle, I believe, in either order you want. And when you have access to the airship, so you can go do all those side quests that are scattered throughout the world, which I neglected to do starting at this point because we were getting close to the podcast, and I really wanted to finish this game.
You can recruit Diekbeck.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you didn't recruit him early, this is when you would recruit him now. He's good because you can like transfer, like you can move like XP to other units using him. So that's like a big thing that you can do with him to help like
because he doesn't level
units
up normally, right?
Right. And then you like give the XP that he would have gotten to other characters. Yeah.
And otherwise, he just powers up as you get power units. And I hear say he can become like the best healer in the game with all of his power units. But those require going to those ancient ruins dotted in like every single location, and I wasn't about to do that.
Yeah.
Let's go around.
Yeah, if you want to invest a lot of time, you can make him like super strong, but it's not necessary for like beating the game or anything. But it's a cool like side thing that you can do.
And he became something of a mascot character for the series. One of two between him and Choco.
Yeah.
They would show up in much later entries where, you know, characters who are mortal might not have been able to show up. So we'll cover Brachia first. We won't go too deep into it because at this point, you're going to towers, you're doing long dungeons in those towers, and you're destroying the towers. That's pretty much the next third of the game here. So I just want to touch on the interesting character points that happen on those, rather than going deep onto every single dungeon. So in Brachia, some dude named Rygar is running the place into the ground. And it turns out, Brachia is Gruga's home. And Rygar, surprise, surprise, is Elena's real father. But he's a bad guy. He's just trying to use her as a trophy. He's placing a mind control device at top of a volcano. So, you go up the volcano, you fight him. Gruga kind of earns Elena's loyalty back because she was understandably pretty biffed by the way that he left and the lies and the fact that she's not his real daughter. But everything goes well eventually. Most importantly, this is our first load-bearing boss. Because after you defeat Rygar, the mind control device, which is this giant dome, starts exploding and collapses into the volcano. This will happen for almost every single tower. I was keeping an eye on this after I started noticing all the load-bearing bosses. Almost every single tower, you defeat the main boss there, and the tower starts collapsing, sometimes in absolutely wild ways. But yeah, this time it's just a nice little plunge into the volcano. Forless is a little bit more weighty because this is where Holn is. And when you head in there, Holn has been destroyed by the people of Ramul, the nearby city that you were in. And it becomes pretty quickly apparent that they're being mind controlled somehow. One of these devices is clearly up and running, and they controlled the people of Ramul to just go on ahead and cleanse Holn. So a bell starts ringing in a temple, the Gia Temple, home to some kind of dark god. Gia is some variety of dark god. They've got a couple of them in there, and a lot of these temples are dedicated to them. And as you go in there to investigate, there's an old dude, a priest, giving a sermon about destroying more evils than just Holn and kind of continuing their crusade. Gauguin pretty quickly notices that the temple is Romalian in design, and the priest seems like he buys into the his role as a hero here, which is kind of interesting to me. He really does think that he's doing the Lord's work here, and that he's not evil, which is different. A lot of the villains in Arc the Lad tend to be pretty happy with their mustache twirling.
Yeah, they seem to be very mwahaha.
We get dark again real quick, because as you catch up to the priest, he uses his mind control ability to get two people to kill themselves with knives in front of your party, just because he can, just to show, hey, I've got this power. You should back off. Then brings Leets up, the young boy from the first time you were here, and says, step back or I'll get him to kill himself too. Which again, we get into some darkness with children in this game. But via the power of friendship, Lisa manages to snap him out of it. And Iga just goes ham on this bell and destroys it, which triggers a monster fight. But he shoots lasers out of his hands to destroy the bell, and it's cool as hell. Like, I don't know if I'm the only one who thought this was like one of the coolest scenes in there, but Iga's kind of a boss. That ends the mind control. Lisa's grandpa dies in here because you can't save anyone in Arc the Lad 2. But he dies saving Lisa. And the priest is another load-bearing boss for this place as the Gia Temple collapses about halfway down. Then Leets brings the townspeople to Holm to help rebuild what they destroyed while they were mind controlled. So you get, like, that's the closest we get to a happy ending in Arc the Lad 2, I think. At this point, Chungara has made a sensor to find more martyr towers. So you find one in Milmana. The big things that happen here are you find out that Sanya is the princess of Milmana, and that Yagun killed the king and queen, which is why Yagun has been in control. He killed them in his monster form. Yagun's got this train cannon that's a big old threat that you have to destroy first. They make a big deal out of it. It shoots down the Silver Noah as it tries to approach the tower here on an oil rig. Or almost shoots it down. So you have to go and deal with this train cannon first. It is also here where they show that Iga seems to be smitten with Sanya. Do they follow, Audra? Do they follow up with that much besides just pointing it out here? I didn't recall
Not
seeing
really.
anything.
Yeah, I don't really think there's any.
Yeah,
future
it doesn't really
scenes.
go anywhere. Yeah.
I was like, oh, interesting. They're gonna have a romance subplot that's not just the main characters, but no, they don't. They kind of do this with Shantae and Gruga too, where it seems like they're kind of have a closer relationship.
Yeah, and then they just don't really.
They don't do anything with it. But before they take down this train cannon, Sanya fires the tank cannon at Yagun's headquarters, and you see him get buried under flaming rubble as the monkey survives. Tokoye Forest, you see the forest spirit once again, but it can't stick around long because the power of all of the guardians are kind of dying out, including the forest spirit, who's not a guardian, but who is still dying out because of humanity and pollution and all the bad things that we've learned about in the first game. This is also when we find out that Yagun, I don't know, was Yagun the monkey the whole time? Or did Yagun transfer into the monkey somehow? Because the monkey is definitely Yagun now.
I don't think they ever explain it.
Yeah, it's just you find the monkey and it starts talking with Yagun's voice and transforms into a big old monkey monster you have to fight.
Yeah, I think it's kind of just like a twist. Like, you think that he's, it's him the whole time, but then he's actually been the monkey the whole time, and like you just didn't realize or something,
I enjoyed Yagun the monkey for what it's worth. And as you're escaping, because you destroy the mind control machine, and the mind control machine this time is the load bearing one. Andel shows up and doesn't save Monkey Yagun because he's evil. And he states that while he lost another control device thanks to Yagun, he still has enough energy to start the revival, which is kind of meant to be mysterious, but we know about the Dark One. We know he's trying to revive the Dark One. I don't think they need to use such unclear terms about the revival at this point. We all know that there's a big evil called the Dark One and that they're trying to bring him back, and that's kind of the overarching plot of the game. Then we go to Balbalard and Amigue, another couple of towers. We get an update on the Sario tribe who moved to Balbalard. We find one of the great generals, Cassadal, who we thought we'd killed before. Nope, that was a golem of his, a cloned chimera, so we have to kill him again. The tower this time is the top of a pyramid. And once again, the mind control mechanism is the load-bearing part of the pyramid before it starts collapsing. This one is pretty interesting because this pyramid kind of sinks into the earth with a lot of earth kind of like jumbling up around it. It was almost hard to make out because it's these old school CG cutscenes every time one of these towers collapses. And this one was a little more abstract than most because you just saw the pyramid start tilting and then sinking. There's more to this, including some drama, including the Saryu tribe, and kind of where they were displaced after most of them were destroyed in the first game. But we don't need to go too deep into that because this podcast can only go so long. And we've got more towers to destroy, including one in Amigue, which is Mexico, basically. It's Arclad, Mexico. We meet a couple comedic relief brothers named Gomez and Antonio, who will kind of be following you around throughout this whole thing. And the tower here is called the God Tower, which has been here as long as anyone can remember. It's a big kind of Roman almost structure leading up to the sky. This is also where you get a little bit of story for Dykebeck as you run into Grolgalde, another machine that was meant to destroy the Seven from the ancient times. He's your resident boss of this tower, and he is the load-bearing contingent on this tower as well. Anyone have anything interesting about these two towers before I keep rolling along? Anyone find anything particularly stand out? Because this really is the third of the game where it's just go find towers.
But I thought it was kind of interesting that they said that the boss and the God Tower was kind of a victim too.
Yes.
But that was sort of an interesting plot thread, but they don't really go into it. It's just like, oh yeah, he was... It's okay
they talk
to feel
about
a little bad about him.
They talk about the morality of robots, how they can only do what they were programmed to do. Which is pretty interesting. It's something that a lot of stories about evolving machine intelligence likes to touch on, and it's interesting to see it in Arc the Lad of all places. This is also the weirdest tower collapse because the whole tower. This is the tower that's in sections, right? Am I wrong?
Yes, it is in sections,
and the sections just start floating up after you defeat Grolgald, and then eventually like the top falls down and they never show, but presumably the rest of them don't float around forever and kind of fall to the ground. It is a weird animation, and I feel like they were just getting bored of tower collapses and needed to find an interesting way to do it this time. The presumably final tower is in Syria, and there's a lot more interesting stuff here, including they revive Manji, Tosh's father, as a zombie, to have him fight Tosh one last time, and hopefully they're thinking it'll help unravel, they'll be able to kill Tosh and help unravel the party. Manji is kind of half controlled as an undead and is killing innocents to draw Tosh out. And even though Tosh is injured by Manji in their first duel, he runs off ahead to Palencia Tower to fight Manji. of course, their plan doesn't work. Tosh defeats Manji, learns the Manji slash, his final technique. But that's not the only thing we get here. We see a tower. In the tower, there is a machine that Ark's mom is trapped in. And Andel insists, hey, if you want to destroy this tower, you got to kill your mom. And then, just like that, Yoshua shows up kind of out of nowhere, Ark's father, and rescues his mom and says, "Nope, we're not doing that. You're not holding her hostage." Tries to send a monster after him. He shrinks it to death. Not sure how that works, but Joshua has some kind of magic that we wish we had.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that they have his like Ark's mom like show up again. Like she's just kind of been missing since like
not mentioned in Arc the Lad 2 to this point.
Yeah. So you just have to remember that like, oh yeah, his like village was like kind of destroyed and we didn't know what happened to anybody in the first game.
And this is where we learned what actually happened to Yoshua when he went up on that mountain 10 years ago. He sacrificed his life on that mountain for the ability to travel through time, and has been traveling throughout to help set up Arc for success, basically. So all those letters you got were him traveling through time to say, hey, you're on the right path. Here's what you might need to do. Here's what to look out for.
Yeah, which is kind of a crazy plot point when you think about it.
Technology and transforming monsters and all of this wasn't enough. They decided to throw time travel right up in there too. Arc the Lad does not leave anything on the table. But then the tower starts collapsing because the towers collapse. It's just what they do. I think that they were made this way. They were made for the failsafe to just be the whole thing collapses. And Joshua sacrifices himself to secure Ark's escape as they leave and gives him this weird little kind of onkish emblem that was his time travel device. Andel is off somewhere with the Ark, gathering the power required to free the Dark One. And that's when Ark says, hey, this seal is breaking because of Andel's plan. We need to strengthen this somehow. I think this part is a little bit hazy to me as to why Ark decides I need to time travel to Kukuru in the past.
It's something to do with her mirror.
Yeah.
Like you have to rebuild strength in the mirror, but the Guardians were the only ones who could do it.
Yeah, and the Guardians are pretty much gone now. So he travels back in time with Kukuru, and you go on a quick little tour of where all the Guardians were in the first game and gain their power into this mirror, which will make Kukuru herself the seal. And the mirror will act as also a seal? I don't know. Sometimes they're a little bit vague on how the mysticism works in this game. Maybe that's just me. So they go and do that. There's not much to it, honestly. There are a few little side stories in there that are pretty interesting. But none of them really tie into the main plot or any characters' arcs. Just Ark and Kukuru are kind of... well, in mine, Ark and Kukuru are happy to spend some time together. You can send whoever you want back to the past, so it doesn't necessarily have to be Ark. So Kukuru ends up doing a lot of the talking just to prevent that from from being a thing. And that's when we find out that there are true Martyr Towers, the final and true ones at the North Pole and South Pole, and those are the ones that you really have to get. So Ark and a party of your choosing takes the North Tower, Elk and a party of your choosing takes the South Tower. And this dungeon is probably the most confusing one. I don't know. What do y'all think?
I didn't like it.
Yeah, because like things you do in one tower affect the other tower. It's got some actual puzzle solving in it, which I don't necessarily need in Arc the Lad.
Yeah, it's just the game. It kind of takes like a maximalist approach at this point, and it's just like I feel like it could have been pared down.
At this point, you're so close to the end of the game. You want there to be momentum driving you through.
Yeah, and that's the thing I have with like a lot of RPGs is that like they want to make the like ending dungeon like the longest and most arduous thing in the entire game, and it's like, well, you don't you don't really need to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially towards the end when you just kind of like, I'm ready for the narrative to resolve.
Hmm.
Which you're definitely at by this point in Arc the Lad 2. Like,
Absolutely,
there are
yeah.
no secrets left to reveal.
Yeah.
You know what you're doing.
Yeah, it's pretty much stretched like as thin or as much as they can at that point.
Andel, you managed to actually finally defeat Andel as the last of the 4 generals. But as he's dying, he just destroys the Ark altogether. So yeah, you can't use that to seal him anymore. Good luck, have fun. And to really put a cherry on top of this, my favorite drum to bang, Andel is your load bearing boss for these towers. We cut to Romalia, King G something.
Guidel?
Gaidel, yes. King Gaidel of Romalia is furious that his 4 generals are dead, and tells. Do you know what Zalbad's role is here?
I think he's like he might be one of the generals too, or another.
He's
general.
definitely introduced as General Zalbad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he is one of the 4. And Zalbad is shows pretty quickly that he is working for the Dark One independently, and that the king is something of a pawn in all this. But the king nonetheless tells Zalbad to take care of Ark and his crew, and everyone heads to Hufion to invade Romalia, which ends up being kind of one of the final areas of the game. Because there's some dungeon to the palace once you break in there, but a lot of the rest of this game is going through Hufion, into Romalia, and getting your way to the castle. But you find out when you get to Hufion that Danny has kept the resistance alive, and himself somehow. I don't think that's necessarily explained, is it?
I mean, he doesn't die when before the train bombing.
Okay, so I'm misremembering.
Yeah, he doesn't die. He's the only one that survives, and they like put him on a bed.
Okay.
Tosh and Shu put him on a bed, and they're like, "Oh,
I
just
remember
rest
that
up."
now. Yeah, he's revived the resistance and is now leading the resistance, which leads to a lot of incredulity from the party. But you basically decide, okay, we need someone to be a decoy and someone to sneak into Romalia. And of course, they think Ark should sneak into Romalia because, and you're the ones who have the power to do anything about this. But they decide, no, everyone wants to focus on Ark. They are the ones that are in the spotlight. If we send them out as the decoy, it'll be no problem for the resistance to break their way in. So they go and do that. Zalbad recognizes that it's a diversion and pulls all of his troops back, saying, "It's fine. I'll catch the resistance and Ark's crew all at once," which is another one of those I've screwed up moments where they're trying to insist that it's not screwing up. This one felt like the most disingenuous to me, maybe. No, I'll just catch them all at the same time. This is exactly what I had planned. It's not that my entire squad was taken out by Arkan crew or anything. So you fight through the city, and eventually get to the castle, which the king freaks out and lifts the castle into the air. And parts of the castle fall away, making this crazy diamond-shaped 2-section rotating palace in the sky. It's actually pretty cool looking, honestly. And the Silver Noah literally just face runs into it to get the crew in. Which is maybe my favorite move. Is like they do it in a cutscene. So after they do it, you see like half the Silver Noah sticking out of this giant, elaborate black obsidian structure. It absolutely delights me. This is where we get the trials for each of the characters that kind of wraps up their character arcs. Every character in the game gets a solo person trial that I believe is tied to the level of the character so that it doesn't completely mess you up if you didn't use someone. Zalbad reveals at this point that monsters cannot affect the Ark in any way. They can't touch it, so that's why they manipulated humans and the King of Romalia to do it for them. Which means that King Gaidel is unwittingly about to start a new Dark Age. And he basically flips the switch, starting the apocalypse. And it pretty well succeeds, honestly. Like, the apocalypse goes through. This is something that you'll see the aftermath of in future Ark of the Lad games, known as like the Great Cataclysm, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Kukuru's seal breaks, so your first fight here for the final boss gauntlet is Kukuru fighting the Dark One. And she, every time she has to fight in this game, she changes back into her old clothes so that they could reuse some sprites, I presume. As she tries to fight them, the Dark One is able to sacrifice Kukuru to break the seal, and Kukuru dies, y'all.
Yeah.
We start off with a big bummer. that won't be the last bummer. Once the Dark One awakens, Gaidel is killed pretty much instantly because he's an idiot and he deserved it. So you fight the Dark One, and you're able to defeat him, but this is not an easy boss fight.
No.
Did you find, Audra, that this was an endurance run more, or did you find like actual difficulty with like having to keep your people up?
Pretty much an endurance run. I had Shantae and Lisa as healers.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a party of Ark and Elk and Tosh. So it's pretty much just whittling away and like casting magic shield all the time.
That was pretty much my party through most of the game. 2 healers, 3 damage dealers. A lot of magic apples saved for the last fight.
Yes, I had about 31 of them.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. Because that's the biggest problem you'll run into on the last boss fight, is he just has so many hit points. Between 2 forms, he's got like 13,000 HP. You just will run out of MP for healing eventually. Unless you've got 31 magic apples, in which case I imagine you were fine.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And then I kept throwing stuff at him. And that did some damage too, so it was...
Just,
yeah, that's something we haven't talked about.
Saving all your
much.
items paid off.
Yes.
The fact that you get items that you can throw at people, we haven't talked about much, but...
Yeah, I found it more useful in the first game than in Ark of the Lad 2, but just because you have so many more options, but it is useful in some cases, for sure.
Yeah. So after you defeat him, he says he'll destroy the world if you can't have it. You know, classic in-game boss stuff. Then Kukuru's ghost appears, saying her body was destroyed, but she lives on inside the Dark One. She keeps him frozen for a little bit, urging Ark to seal him, and then Yoshua's ghost appears, because this is some Star Wars level stuff that we're on now, saying that Ark's sword could seal away the Dark One. The Dark One says Ark will die if he seals him, and I mean, as expected, Ark does it anyways. And in fact does die. So our 2 main characters from Ark the Lad and, you know, the titular Ark the Lad both pass away in the final boss fight. And of course, the Dark One is a load-bearing boss. The castle collapses and destroys a lot more stuff underneath it. And that's where we get to the ending. Like, that's... Elk and crew are bummed because they just seem to survive the end of the world and not stop it. This cataclysm affected everyone, killed a lot of people. But Ark and Kukuru's spirits appear to say, hey, you've still got hope. The world still exists, at least. You can rebuild. You just need to start traveling around and help fix things. Got to find survivors and begin rebuilding, and have to show hope to those remaining. That is the valiant, like, we won message that the game ends on.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, you know, thinking like if G-Craft had kept working on these games, like where they might have taken that in the future, you know, because I think it is like an interesting setup for maybe what would come after for the series, but since they got bought by Square Enix, that never happened, and then we get a very different game with Ark the Lad 3. So
yes, Even though I still love Arc the Lad 3, it is very clearly a different beast.
Yeah, and I think too it kind of speaks to their G-Craft's like more storytelling kind of tone and what they preferred to do, where you have a more like somber ending or a more like morally kind of gray ending. It's not like everything is wrapped up in a bow and you defeated the evil and everything. It's a more complicated and um complicated ending that isn't necessarily like good triumphed over evil, and there
Yeah.
there's like ramifications from what happened, and you see that in front mission too. So it's I just think it kind of makes the game stand out a little bit compared to a lot of its contemporaries.
Yeah, it's very much a the battle's done, not necessarily the battle's won kind of ending.
Yeah.
But that's Arc the Lad 2, and in a nearly 2-hour nutshell. What did y'all think? How did you feel about how everything kind of wrapped up and the bleakness throughout the game?
Yeah, I think it's I think that the way the ending I think the way it ends is very fitting. I think especially with what's kind of set up in Arc the Lad 1, like
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense that this is the kind of ending that they would end up with. But I think comparing it, the way that you get there, I think in Arc the Lad 2 is so much more interesting than what's set up in 1, and they give you a lot more reason to care about the actual people in the world, and so that the ramifications of this cataclysm are so much more impactful, because you've seen like all the parts of the world and you've connected with people in every region, and you have each of the characters has some connection to the different areas that you've been to. So I think it just connects you a lot more to the setting than the first game, and that's something I think is really stands out about Arc the Lad 2.
Yeah, the big cast really pays off for them in giving you
Mhm.
that grounding connection to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally liked the ending. I thought it was the whole message of that at least there's still hope
Mm-hmm.
was very nice.
It is kind
in
of
a way.
bittersweet in
It's
a way
bittersweet, but
yeah.
It makes sense, especially with how everything beforehand kind of sets up.
Yeah, it's like it's challenging you, like you need to be optimistic about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like as far as like the structure of the game and how it's kind of laid out, like definitely like I feel like you could come away from this game feeling like there's a bit too much there,
Mm-hmm.
And it almost kind of has like it has like the opposite problem that the first game does, where the first game's like way too slight in terms of characters and content and everything, and this game, while it has like I like the characters, and I think that the story that they tell I think works and is interesting, it's just drug out across so much content that um it's almost like you too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that it's a longer game than the first one, but maybe they went a little bit too hard on it, trying to make this everything that they wanted the first one to be.
Well,
Yeah,
didn't
exactly.
they want the first one to come out like with the console?
Yeah, they wanted the Arc the Lad 1 and 2 to be one game, but in order to make it come out with the console, they had to pare down Arc the Lad 1.
Yeah, and I
split
think
it
even
like
then it came out in '95, so it would have been a few months after the console came out.
So here's my question: do you guys think that if they had the opportunity to make it all one game, it would have just been like all of Arc the Lad 1 slapped onto the beginning of Arc the Lad 2, or do you think they would have mixed and matched a little bit more?
Yeah, I think you would have gotten like a pretty similar construction. Like I think that you'd still would start with like Arc, and you would start with the party and going through the same story beats, but there might be more um of the kind of elements that you see in Arc the Lad 2 like sprinkled in with that. So probably not as like streamlined as Arc the Lad 1 is, but still, going through those story beats relatively quickly, I think. But I mean, it's hard to know just because it's so, that's not what happened.
I would
But
put money on half the cast not appearing in a unified Arc the Lad.
yeah, no, that's probably, yeah, I don't know how much of the second party you would have. Yeah. Like probably still Elk and Lisa and Shu maybe, but I don't know beyond that.
Yeah, it seemed like that bigger party served for the sake of like they had a lot of dungeons where they wanted to split your party. So like they felt comfortable. Either they did those dungeons because they had the larger party in this, or they made the larger party because they wanted to be able to do those kinds of dungeons.
Yeah, and I definitely think that like 2 is somewhat of a reaction to 1.
Yeah.
Like that they wouldn't, that maybe the game wouldn't have had, ArcLad 2 wouldn't have had so many dungeons and so much side content had it all been one game as was originally planned. Probably not.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It would have probably just been like 30 hours of Arc the Lad 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I would not have liked that.
I love Arc the Lad 1, but part of the reason I love it is because it's short. Like, I like a bite-sized RPG experience, and they're rare.
Yeah, it's very concise.
I definitely think playing 2 makes you retroactively like 1 a lot more too, because you can kind of see where it's gonna go. And I personally find the characters of Arc the Lad 1 a lot more interesting, having seen where they end up in 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before I get into any housekeeping, anyone have any final thoughts on the games? We might have just touched all those pretty well.
Now I kind of want to play Arc the Lad 3.
You should, despite it not being, despite it feeling different. I still think it's a very fun game. Like gameplay wise, they did some interesting stuff.
Oh,
yeah,
good.
Yeah, it's worth playing. Definitely, despite the change in developer, and I wouldn't say it's quite as good as Arc the Lad 2, but it's definitely, as far as like strategy RPGs on the PS1 go, it's in the better half of those, I would say.
Huh. Good.
And I will say, I love Twilight of the Spirits on the PS2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good.
It benefits a lot from like being pretty separate from the other games, so it kind of lets them do a lot more of their own thing.
Well, that's all we have for Arc the Lad 2, but that's not all we have for Retro Encounter. Coming in May, we've got an episode on Persona 3 Reload, RPG Obsessions with special guest David Vink, 2-part journal on Omori, and in June, we will be playing winner of our last poll, Grandia 2. If you would like to contact us, you can get us by email at retro@rpgfan.com, and you can follow us on social media, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube, as RPG Fan or RPG Fancom. And be sure to join the RPG Fan Discord. It's always a party in there. We have a shop at rpgfan.com/shop, or you can find the link to the shop at rpgfan.com. We have 2 other podcasts at RPG Fan, including Random Encounter, primarily about new releases and current events, as well as Rhythm Encounter about RPG music. If you'd like to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, whatever, we absolutely love feedback, especially 5 stars, but that's just us being greedy. You leave us whatever you want. And otherwise, all that's left is where to find us. So let's start with Nick.
You can find me on Blue Sky. I think nickmanwrites.bsky. Whatever.
And Ben.
Yep. You can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
Finally, Audra.
You can email me at audrab@rpgfan.com.
And if you want to find me, you can find me at Wes Iliff on Twitter or at Lone Weasel on Blue Sky. I think that's about it for us. You all have a wonderful evening, and I forgot what sign-off I used last time.
Keep watching the skis.
Y'all have a wonderful evening, and be nice to yourself out there.